Welcome back to the Brittany Hughes Show. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Coming at you a day early this week, mostly because I have some things that I want to say. And when you have a podcast, you can do that. So here we go. This week, of course, no shortage of things to talk about. This is one of those weeks I wish that I had like a 4-hour radio show because I could fill it up and probably have material to spare. But who knew that the thing that would finally send leftists into absolute apoplexy this week would be Donald Trump making a campaign stop at a Pennsylvania McDonald's. I did not have this one on my 2024 election bingo card, not gonna lie. But the one thing that you can always count on with the left and the liberal media is that they will take absolutely anything this man does. Anything he eats, anything he wears, anything he references, he can scratch his nose in the direction of it and they will take a dump on it. Forget his policies, forget his platform, forget whatever it is that he's campaigning on at the moment. This man could drink a Coke and the media would accuse him of waging war on Pepsi, honestly. So this was actually a brilliant move from a campaign perspective. Donald Trump stopping at a McDonald's to hand out some French fries and toss a couple of baskets and shake hands with some people. He wasn't there particularly long, but it was brilliant from a campaign perspective, just purely from a political strategy standpoint. And of course, Kamala Harris, who is currently facing about 47 different plagiarism accusations, has also been accused of lying about her alleged employment at a McDonald's somewhere in California, like back in the 1980s. She started telling this story that nobody had ever heard before about how she did fries. That's how she puts it. She did fries, whatever that means, for a summer at McDonald's to help put herself through law school. The problem is there's no evidence at all that she actually worked for a McDonald's. That's not to say that it's totally outside the realm here, because of course we can't prove that she didn't. McDonald's says that they didn't keep every employment record dating back to the 80s. They do have some. They don't seem to have any record that she ever worked there. But they say, look, there may have been employment at some point. We don't have all of those records. It's notable that she can't, or rather won't for whatever reason, say which McDonald's she worked at. There's no pictures of her working at McDonald's. There's no payroll records. There's no receipts of any kind showing that she worked there. Apparently, the news media have actually gone to the McDonald's in that area, and the employees have all been sworn to secrecy. They've been told not to say anything to the press one way or the other. And the kind of suspicious part about all of this is that the story about her doing fries that she can't elaborate on or give any details about just kind of started cropping up around the same time that she started telling everybody about how she grew up as a middle-class kid every time she's asked to explain her economic policy, or, to tell struggling Americans how she's going to help lower the price of groceries, despite the fact that she's already been in office for 3.5, almost 4 years. So when she says, I worked at McDonald's, as some sort of proof that she understands the plight of everyday blue-collar minimum wage working Americans, it's reasonable to want some evidence of that, right? I mean, considering that this is a brand new story that's been added to her bio after she has already spent decades in politics, this is the first we're hearing of this, and people want to know if it's just a ploy to appeal to working class people, if it's a lie. I mean, kind of like when Tim Walz says that he's a retired command sergeant major who carried a gun in war and was in Tiananmen Square and went through the IVF process with his wife to conceive their children, all of which he has said, and none of which is true. Americans don't want a fake resume shoved in front of their faces while they're on their way to the polls to vote for the next leader of their country, right? So this is a reasonable request. So that's kind of how the whole McDonald's thing started off in the first place. So when Donald Trump shows up and he throws on an apron and he starts tossing baskets in the fryer and handing out Big Macs to people in their minivans, it's a troll. It's a troll. And frankly, it's a brilliant one. And people over on social media went absolutely bananas over it because it was hilarious, right? And by the way, if you watch the video of the people pulling up to shake Trump's hand and he's handing them their food, it includes more than a few immigrants who, thank him for what he's done, who say that they are supporters of his, which kind of blows up the entire media-driven narrative that Trump is some xenophobic racist that, hates non-white people or whatever. Clearly, that's not true. And so there are multiple reasons why the media just absolutely lost their minds over this. A, because it worked. It was popular. People loved it. And B, because it flew in the face of this picture of Trump that they have tried so hard for the past frankly, decade now, but especially heading into this election, the past year and a half, to create. It doesn't work. And it made the media awfully mad. So mad, in fact, that now they're targeting the franchise that dared to let Trump through its doors. Newsweek actually expended time and resources to run a full article on how this one particular McDonald's location failed a health inspection. They wrote this, quote, Trump, a big fan of McDonald's food and a self-professed germaphobe, wore an apron over his shirt and tie, but did not wear gloves or a hairnet during his visit, stating that his hands were, quote, nice and clean. According to the Midas Touch, he went straight to work without washing his hands. Employees not washing their hands was one of the reasons the restaurant failed its most recent inspection. Oh my Lord, Newsweek is actually going after this McDonald's because they are so outraged that somebody let Trump walk into their building. They haven't done this over, all of the restaurants that Kamala Harris has walked into, or Tim Walz. I mean, Tim Walz and Doug Emhoff just made a stop at a coffee shop recently where, of course, they were seen on video walking away without actually paying the barista. And Doug, I think it was a staffer, or maybe it was Doug Emhoff's daughter. Somebody had to actually go up to the barista and be like, oh, by the way, somebody's going to come up to pay you, I promise. Like some staffer with the campaign wallet is going to come hand you money, I promise. But nobody in the media went to that coffee shop and went through their health inspection records or went through their business rolls or whatever to try to dig up dirt on this place. Of course not. But because Donald Trump showed up at this McDonald's is now under fire and is getting raked across the coals for pretty much everything that they've ever done or not done. Newsweek went on to detail all the ways that this franchise failed to comply with these government-regulated health rules, including things like managers not wearing hairnets while helping out and, quote, heavy ice and frost buildup in the walk-in freezer. All because, Trump showed up. And of course, then Newsweek, in the same exact breath, accused Trump of orchestrating a, quote, stunt by pretending to work there for like 20 minutes. Apparently, the media thinks that it is news to all of the rest of us, morons that we are, that Trump did not actually pick up a side gig flipping burgers and tossing fries. They have to explain to us ad nauseum that this was in fact a political campaign event, that he was only pretending to work at McDonald's, like we couldn't see with our own eyes, like we are so stupid that we can't understand. Of course it was a campaign stop. Nobody thinks Donald Trump actually picked up a part-time job in addition to running for president, handing out fast food to people. Of course not. Of course it was a campaign stop. The fact that the media thinks that they have to explain this to us, like they're exposing some big lie here, is ridiculous. And it really goes to show just how dumb they think you are. It's funny, too, because the same media that is targeting this McDonald's franchise and exposing, everything bad that they've ever done. They failed their health inspection. They don't wash their hands. Their managers weren't wearing hairnets. They've got, some ice in the freezer. Oh, my gosh, right? This is the same media that regularly push these left-wing proposals to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour for employees at places like McDonald's, who apparently aren't even smart enough to wash their hands, according to Newsweek. But we've got to raise their wage to at least $15 an hour. This is the same media that habitually laments the burdens of working class folks, right? The same minimum wage earning working class folks that they are now apparently all too happy to throw under the bus on national news if it suits their political agenda. It is amazing how they flip-flop on this. Newsweek added that they had, quote, contacted McDonald's and the Trump campaign for comment outside business hours, but had not yet received a response. Of course, it's not exactly clear what they expect McDonald's or the Trump campaign to say, other than maybe to suggest that these supposed journalists over at Newsweek go find some actual news to report. And to remind you of the double standard here, the leftist media had absolutely no problem with Kamala Harris orchestrating a two-take pre-planned visit to a Sheetz gas station in August on some contrived quest for Doritos. You remember that? Back in August, she and her husband, Doug Emhoff, who was taking a break from fornicating with his nanny and smacking around his ex-girlfriends, I guess, they made what we are supposed to believe was a totally off-the-cuff, impromptu, not at all orchestrated, not at all fake stop at a Sheetz gas station in Pennsylvania. And according to the video, she walks in, her and Doug and Tim Walz, on this quest to find Doritos to prove that, Kamala Harris, just like everybody else, eats chips and goes to gas stations. And this is supposed to make her relatable, right? And we know the whole entire thing was staged because there's two different versions of this trip to Sheetz out there. In one video, her husband Doug is seen handing her a bag of Doritos as soon as she walks into the store. Here, honey, I found your Doritos, just like everybody else eats. And she gets all giddy because she found her chips and whatever. And then standing over there, awkwardly, is Tim Walz, who in another clip is seen handing her a different bag of Doritos, while her husband, Doug, stands there holding the bag of Doritos that he had already handed to Kamala. I mean, the fact that there's two completely different versions of this trip to Sheetz out there on the interwebs tells us that this whole entire thing was what? It was staged. It was staged. I could give a furry end of a rat's rear end whether, Kamala found these Doritos or who handed them to her or whether she walked out with 20 bags of the things. I don't really care. But the way that it was done and the videos that were released tell us that this whole entire thing was an orchestrated stunt. Again, a campaign event. It was a ploy. Because that's really all political campaigns are at this point in the world of social media. Campaigns are simply gigantic marketing events, right? Everybody does that. But unlike Trump's little stunt over at McDonald's, which was never meant to look like an impromptu stop, it was never intended to seem random and unplanned, Kamala's was. And it clearly was not. But the media had no problem there. The media did not blow up on X and start, running articles and holding panels to discuss how Kamala didn't actually just stop over at a Sheetz. They had that place cleared out. They had already sent security in there. They had their whole little skit about this search for Doritos already orchestrated. They didn't do it very well because it was clearly a sham, obviously. But the media had no problem with that. Nor did they have a problem about the Harris campaign kicking actual diners out of a busy Pittsburgh eatery and bringing in actors to pose as customers for a photo op. That same exact trip back in August that Harris made to Pennsylvania, she made a stop at Primanti Brothers, which is a popular diner in Pittsburgh. It's known for its sandwiches and fries. Fancy that. And a whole bunch of people got mad because it turns out that the restaurant, which was full of actual paying customers who were just there to eat lunch, they actually closed down early and they kicked their customers out of the place by 4 p.m., which happened to be right in the middle of the Pirates game, no less, so that Harris and her campaign could come in. And then the campaign, not the restaurant, the campaign bust fake customers in white vans. There's video of this, busing people in white vans. And they stocked this diner full of people to make it look like Harris had just popped in unannounced to mingle with the common folk in Pittsburgh. And the actual customers who had been booted out of their seats in the middle of the baseball game were standing over on the street corner like half a block down, and they're pissed. They're pissed because they got kicked out of their restaurant in the middle of a baseball game that they were watching with absolutely no notice whatsoever. And they're standing down there going like, what the heck? I mean, literally, they were protesting in the street and yelling at the campaign for staging a fake visit and bringing in fake customers because it was, I don't know, it was easier or better than showing up to a less controlled environment filled with actual people that you're trying to get to vote for you. God forbid one of them ask her a question that she can't answer because her teleprompter's not there. But the media had no problem with that. Nope. But when Donald Trump spends 20 minutes working the drive-thru at Mickey D's to connect with average blue-collar Americans and their customers, it's bizarre, right? So say the squawking heads over at MSNBC who are absolutely outraged that Trump went viral on social media for handing out bags of fast food to people. MSNBC asked Democrat Congresswoman Barbara Lee what she thought of Trump's 20-minute stint as a Mickey D's fry cook. Here's what she had to say.
If you're on his campaign, and I know you are certainly not, I'm not making any implication of that, but what is the logic behind this, going to a McDonald's? I mean, we know the guy likes Big Macs and filet of fish, and he's used the word love to describe the way he feels about the food there before. But what's this about?
There's no logic to it. It's a stunt. He has not put forth an economic agenda He, as you know, appears to be not well, and he's engaged in some really bizarre types of activities during this campaign. We know who Donald Trump is. Just look at him and what he's doing. And is this presidential? I mean, this is not what the country needs in terms of the leader of the free world and in terms of a person who's going to ensure our national security and peace and security in the world.
Well, I'll tell you, the people who pulled up from the to the window and took bags of fast food from Trump certainly seemed to think it was presidential. I mean, regardless of what you think of him, regardless of what you think of his policies or his platform, regardless of whether you're going to vote for him, regardless of whether you think that, anything that he stands for is correct or good or something that you support. I want to know why the media, I want to know why Barbara Lee, I want to know why MSNBC thinks that it's not presidential for someone who is running to be the leader of a country to mingle with the everyday people that he's trying to get to vote for him. Why isn't that presidential? This sort of elitist mentality, right, that the media have been pushing for years now. That Americans are just a bunch of morons that have to be told things like, oh, by the way, Trump didn't actually pick up a side gig working at McDonald's. And if you're stupid enough to believe that, here we are to shed some light on it for you. That Americans are so dumb that we need to be controlled, we need to be parented by a group of elite politicians who are so much smarter than us, who are so beyond us, while we just sit over here, gnawing on our windowsills and I don't know, drooling on our own shoes or whatever. That we need smarter people to run our lives for us. We need the government to come in and tell us what the right choices are, just like we needed health experts to come in and tell us what we should do during COVID, just like we need, we need bureaucrats to tell us how our children should be educated. We need people to help manage our lives because there's no way that we could ever do it for ourselves. And all of that kind of feeds into this narrative, right? It kind of bolsters this idea that somebody shaking hands with ordinary people and flipping burgers next to the minimum wage employee that we're being told is so wonderful that they need to earn $20 an hour, but also is so lowly that it's not presidential to mingle with them. Interesting how the narrative changes depending on the agenda the media is pushing at the moment, right? I mean, the crowd that included, families in minivans and moms and more than a few immigrants, they were thanking Trump for coming to meet them, even if it meant he had to put on an apron and toss a few baskets of fries to do it. Oh, but the handwriting and the sanctimonious finger wagging and the fact checking didn't end there. By the by, can I just say, this little political maneuver, this little stunt to troll Kamala over at McDonald's, over her claims that she flipped burgers for a summer, this would have landed well on social media regardless, because it's gold, honestly. But I don't think it would have gone nearly as big and had the impact that it did if the media had just left it alone. Just let it be what it was for a few minutes and then let it go. But the fact that their heads spun around and popped off over this thing, the fact that they lost their ever-loving minds over what was, admittedly a well-orchestrated campaign event, but clearly just a campaign event nonetheless. I mean, how many politicians have we seen handing out food and pouring beers and manning the grill? That's not super uncommon, right? I mean, Chuck Schumer has done that. Of course, when he does it, the burgers are still frozen and there's slices of unmelted cheese on them. But hey, I guess some people are just better at showmanship than others. But Trump did this one well and it landed and the media's brains exploded. And that, frankly, I think is part of the reason why this whole thing spread like wildfire. And they just could not stop themselves. Newsweek, as I mentioned earlier, ran an entire article just smearing this local McDonald's franchise for every little bit of dirt they could dig up. This local store run by some dude with a family who employs local people, and now they're dragged through the mud because I guess they took advantage of some free publicity and let Trump pass out some fries or whatever. But Newsweek couldn't stop there. Right after that, and this one, honestly, I'm still struggling to process because the stupid actually hurts on this one. Right after that, Newsweek picked up another hard-hitting piece of journalistic gold, fresh off of openly smearing a local McDonald's franchise for basically being a salmonella-coated, rat-infested hellhole because they let Donald Trump hand out some fries to some people. Newsweek is now there to shine a light on yet another hard-hitting truth in the interest of protecting the American public, of course. And that's that the image you may have seen floating around on the internet of Trump sporting a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform and standing on a football field may, in fact, be fake. So first Newsweek tells us that he didn't get a side gig flipping burgers. Now they tell us that he's not really a professional linebacker. Oh, how our hopes have been dashed. Providing a great service to American voters everywhere, Newsweek tweeted on Monday, quote, Donald Trump has shared what is likely an AI-generated image on his Truth Social account showing him as a player for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and suggesting that the 78-year-old former president may not, in fact, have just made the starting lineup on an NFL team. Because we need Newsweek here to tell us these things. Thank God. In case you'd gotten your hopes up, breaking news, Trump will not be taking the field against the New York Giants this weekend. What would we ever do without the Fourth Estate? Who care so much about calling out Trump's staged campaign tactics that they will burn a McDonald's franchise's reputation to the ground and run entire articles on how a photo of Trump in a Steelers uniform is not real. Thank God. Thank God. But absolutely nothing on this. Speaking of contrived Harris campaign events, former California First Lady Maria Shriver gave the game away on Monday night when she responded to an audience member in Michigan at a Harris campaign event who asked if they would get to ask Harris questions during this Q&A, which had been billed as a town hall, which usually means that onlookers, audience members, get to bring and ask their own questions of a candidate. That is what a town hall is, right? It's not supposed to be scripted. It's not supposed to be rehearsed. It's supposed to be off the cuff. You have to answer questions from the people that you want to vote for you. And here's how Shriver responded to this person who was simply asking if they might get a chance to ask a question of Harris, who they are being asked to vote for. And here is Shriver's answer.
You're not, unfortunately. We have some predetermined questions, and hopefully I'll be able to ask some of the questions that might be in your head. I hope so.
So we've got predetermined questions here, right? It's a town hall. Not really. Because we've got predetermined questions, and of course that led many to wonder and to ask whether Harris herself, whether her campaign had been provided this list of questions before the event, right? If they're predetermined questions, if you already know what you're going to ask, it's not a stretch to think that maybe you let the campaign know so that Harris could prepare her answers, right? At the very least, this means it was not a town hall. A town hall means people can show up and they bring their questions and they're unscripted and they're not handed over to the campaign beforehand. And the candidate has to be ready with an answer or be prepared to be exposed as a buffoon, which is exactly the risk that you should have to take when you're running for office of the president. You should have to answer off-the-cuff, unprepared questions of the people that you're asking to vote for you. But that's not what happened here. What happened here was a pre-scripted, pre-written out Q&A event with Harris where the media, and quite possibly Harris herself, controlled the entire thing. And they called it a town hall because they brought in some live people with pulses to sit there in person and watch this charade, but didn't let them ask anything. So it wasn't a town hall. That's fake. If you're looking for the definition of staged, this would be it. And that's a lot more important. This is a lot more relevant than whether Donald Trump, suited up on the 50-yard line on NFL Sunday. Or whether, maybe that might have been a joke. You think? The media would rather focus on that. The media would rather spend days running articles and having panels and losing their minds on social media over whether he really learned how to cook fries. I mean, the New York Times ran an entire article asking McDonald's employees to critique the video of Donald Trump shaking a basket of fries and whether or not he did it correctly. Hard-hitting journalism we got here, y'all. But they don't care whether Kamala Harris is simply pretending to have answers to people's sincere concerns, or, whether Tim Walz is telling the truth about pretty much anything he says about himself at this point. It seems that the media are far more interested in getting to the bottom of whether Donald Trump tossed fries correctly or whether their hand-picked Democrat candidate can answer basic questions on the economy without cue cards. Which one of those things do you think is more relevant to American voters? Which one of those things do you think is more in line with the media's job in providing factual information to the American public ahead of Election Day? But see, that's not what this is about. The media are not interested in exposing truth. The media are not interested in making sure that Americans go to the polls armed with facts and information and knowledge and truth about the people they're being asked to vote for. The media are interested in painting a narrative that makes their preferred candidate look like a gold star and demonizes anybody that they disagree with. And that's why when someone that they don't like, in this case Donald Trump, in many cases other GOP politicians, but in this particular case Donald Trump, when he does something that lands, when he does something that's interesting, when he does something that makes him look like he might be connecting with people, when he does something that seems like it might be resonating, or that pokes a hole in the narrative, in the picture that they have painted of him, they immediately lose their minds. They panic, almost like they've got a reason to be afraid. And with that, that's the Brittany Hughes Show for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you'll be back with me next week, where we will probably air at our normal time on Thursday. In the meantime, head over to Apple Podcasts. You can hit you can hit the subscribe button on the Brittany Hughes Show. That way you won't ever miss an episode. You can also hit the subscribe button to the Newsbusters podcast on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays with Tim Graham. We've got tons of stuff for you to load up your phone with, listen to going down the road, picking up the kids from school, heading to work, wherever you might be. I will see you guys back here next Thursday. I hope you have a fantastic weekend and a blessed week.